Join me today as I share my journey to finding out that my son was autistic. What did I miss? What would I do differently? And what can you look for in your own child? Hi, welcome to Disability Ed Pros. I'm Diana Fannin, epilepsy warrior, school psychologist, special education director, and autism mama. On this channel, I share evidence-based strategies, advocacy tips, and personal insights to empower parents of children with disabilities. When he was born, he had a little bit of trouble breathing, and so he ended up in the NICU. So did I notice anything wrong at first? It's hard to say, but it wasn't necessarily related to autism. So some of the complications, there really was only one. He had a little bit of trouble breathing on his own, and so he spent some time in the NICU as they tried to figure out if anything was going on. He saw a boatload of specialists, which was kind of terrifying, but also sort of comforting. At the end of that week, everything seemed fine. The benefit of this time in the NICU is that our hospital, the way they do things is that we have a 3-month follow-up with a team of specialists. So more specialists, more doctors, and they follow up with him. They see how he's doing, they double check on everything. And so at that point, we check on his developmental milestones, his feeding, his sleeping, all of the things that you might think would be a part of that visit. So the things that they noticed at that appointment that I hadn't noticed, I didn't have any significant concerns at that point. They noticed that he had what they call a head lag. So they do a test called the pull to sit. So they grab his little hands and they pull him up. So exactly what you think it would be. They pull him into a sitting position. 3 months old. 3-month-olds aren't sitting by themselves at that point. So they pulled him up and they expect the trunk, sort of the core up to his head, they expect it all to come up at the same time. And in his case, his head was a little bit behind. And so that led to a diagnosis of hypotonia at that point. So that's low tone. The way that it's been explained to me, which has been a really useful explanation for me because I kept saying, oh, but he's still strong. It was that, if you think about a rubber band that you might put in your hair, at the beginning, it's fairly tight, meaning you only have to wrap it around twice to get a nice, good ponytail. But then the next time, after you use it for a little while, it stretched out a little bit. And so then you might need to wrap it around 3 times. And then a month or 2 later, you might need to wrap it around 4 times. So the way Grant's body is, and any child who is low tone or has hypotonia, it is less tense. The muscles are less tense. They're just in a more sort of relaxed state all the time. And so that just affects some of the ways they approach things, some of the ways they're able to do things. And in his case, he was a little more fatigued at things. That came on later. I didn't notice it, like I said, at that point. The other thing that they noticed was that he had nystagmus. What that is the pupil of the eye will either go back and forth horizontally or vertically. And there can be causes of that. In his case, it was idiopathic, meaning no known cause. So we left with a referral for physical therapy and for a pediatric ophthalmologist. So did I think anything wrong at that point? No. So I just followed up with the referrals and figured that was it. We take care of it, keep moving along. So from 6 to 12 months, those are the things that we took care of. He did end up getting glasses because he also had a little bit of trouble with distance vision. He did great, and he's been wearing glasses since then, and he's also done great with the glasses. Cut to right around 12 months. We'd been doing some baby-led weaning, which worked really well for him. So he'd eaten all kinds of foods. He did a really good job with the foods that he was eating. But the one thing that was a little bit difficult with him was the amount that he would put in his mouth. So it was difficult for us to leave him unsupervised. And when I say that, I don't mean that leaving him at the table and I was heading off to the grocery store. I mean that I couldn't leave him for a minute or 2 while I walked into the kitchen. I was worried about what was going to happen because he would put 3, 4, 5 pieces of something in his mouth and then sometimes not fully chew it. So I was nervous about the way he was sort of processing the food that was in his mouth. So I talked to somebody who happened to be an occupational therapist and a pediatric feeding specialist. And I said, when do I know if I need something, if I need support with this? Because I'd done my Dr. Google searches, and everything I found wasn't really what he was doing. He wasn't pocketing food, he wasn't holding it for later, he just wasn't fully chewing it, he wasn't fully waiting until the next piece. And so she said to me that the way you know if it's a problem is if it's a problem for the family. And what I described to her is a problem because I couldn't ever leave him. And so I got a referral from my pediatrician. We went and started occupational therapy, and that seemed to start to help him. We worked on chewing, we worked on some sensory things, and that seemed to be for him where it was. He was having some trouble with mouth mapping, so he didn't quite know where the food was or how much of it was there. And so we started working on that, and we continued working on that from that point forward, and it really did seem to help him. So did he miss any developmental milestones at that point? He really hadn't. He had been in physical therapy, keep in mind, so that was a big help. So he sat up when he was supposed to, he rolled over when he was supposed to, he crawled when he was supposed to. And at that point, we didn't really expect him to walk. He could have been walking, but we didn't expect it. That would end up being delayed, and I'll share a little bit more about that later. But the thing that was happening now was he was almost 18 months, and that is when I started to look at switching the type of childcare he had. He had had a nanny. I'm a single mom, and so I needed to have some option or someone around to support when I was at work all day. And so I had a nanny. I was looking at that point to something that was a little more, that allowed him a little more engagement with peers, because he was a little bit delayed in language. At that point, it wasn't a huge delay, but he was a little bit behind. And I thought being around peers all day might have been helpful for those language delays. I also thought it might be a little more affordable because, again, I am a single parent. So we looked into the daycare option. I found a great place for him. I was thrilled about it. I had to go out of town for a conference at the time when there were a few days where they wanted him to come visit for 30 minutes a day for 4 days so he could transition more seamlessly. So my best friend supported me with that while I was out of town and took him. She called me once and said, it's really interesting to see him around all these kids because he does seem, a little bit smaller. He had a little trouble with sitting in one of the chairs. And I didn't really process what she was saying. Or I didn't hear it in the way she intended it, or maybe she was just being too gentle with me. I'm not sure what it was. So cut to the day of the fourth visit. I am in Denver at a conference. I get a call from the daycare and they say, we can't take care of him. We're so sorry. So I go through probably 15 different emotions and dissolve into tears. I am angry, I am mad, I am sad, I am overwhelmed. The only thing I didn't really think about in that moment was the fact that I needed childcare. You would think that would maybe be the first thing I would think about, but it wasn't. I wasn't worried about that. I don't know why, but it didn't even occur to me. The thing that was the biggest thing on my mind, the overwhelming feeling for me, was guilt. How did I miss it? How did I fail my child? How did I not know where he was in reference to other kids, where he was supposed to be? Now, keep in mind, I've spent roughly 20 years helping other people, whether they're parents, whether they're teachers, whether they're administrators, whether they're whoever they are. That is what I've spent my career doing. Conducting assessments, providing services, figuring out how to make sure kids are taken care of in the best way possible. And I missed it in my own kid. So at this point, there's still no diagnosis, or eligibility or anything like that. But I just didn't know where he was, right? I had missed it. And I was mad at the school because I felt like I had told them exactly where he was. I told them he wasn't walking. I told them that he needed supervision, but that subsided quickly because I knew that I had to help my kid. I missed it. And I wanted to just bury my head and go away and not deal with anything. But I don't have that choice. We don't have that choice when we're taking care of our kids, do we? So I gave myself about an hour. I sat in my room, lights off, buried under the covers, my hotel room, because I was at my conference. And then I had to go to a meeting at the conference. And luckily, I also had friends and coworkers who I could talk to about this and who said, this is what you're going to do. This is what you need to put in place. This is how you're going to take care of it. So I had people who were able to be emotionally supportive and also help me put actions into place, because that's what I knew that I had to. I knew that I had to be an advocate for my child. And so I got moving. I had accessed early intervention earlier when he was about 3 months, and I had done sort of the intake, but I hadn't really utilized any of the services because I had been getting services through my insurance for him. So I got moving and I said, this is what I need. He's behind. He's really, really far behind. Daycare wouldn't take him. This is what I need. And so I got assessments done. I got services in place. And it was right around the end of October, right after he turned 18 months. By January, I had services, I had assessments done, and I had him in place at a center-based program through our early intervention provider, which in California is the regional center. So he started going 3 days a week to a center-based program, which was kind of like a preschool, but it offers occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapy as part of the program. And then I got his services moved over there as well. So I had the same people who were with him on a daily basis were also offering him occupational therapy and physical therapy, and he flourished through this program. This program was the best thing that ever happened to him. He continued that, and then he still wasn't walking until a little bit later. And then at 2, we go to his pediatrician appointment just for the 2-year checkup. And they have some concerns because he's still not walking. And then also we do the autism checklist at that appointment, and he hits a few of them, right? He is not walking. He's not pointing. His little fingers just didn't want to work for him. And I wasn't concerned about the fact that he wasn't pointing because he hadn't been pointing at all, but he had been doing what the intent of pointing is. So pointing is used for 2 reasons. One of them is joint attention, and the other one is to express a need or a desire. So from the time he was little, he couldn't get his fingers to work. And so he would use his whole hand to point, or he would grab me and bring me over to either engage in something with me or to tell me that he needed something. So I was never really worried about the fact that he wasn't pointing, but it was another indicator on this scale, along with a little bit of a language delay. So my pediatrician recommended that we go see a neurologist just in case something else was causing the delay in walking, and that we go see a developmental pediatrician. Now, the developmental pediatrician we saw had known Grant since he was 3 months old, so that was comforting. And also, by this point, I had started sort of sitting with the possibility of him being autistic. I didn't have any concerns about the label of autism or the possibility that he was autistic. I just hadn't seen it. And most people who were around him, who were also experts in the field, had not seen it either. Another reason I want to share my story with my son is because there is so little of a type of autism. You hear a lot now that you've met one autistic person. If you meet one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And I can't endorse anything more wholeheartedly than that, because I work with a lot of different types of autistic people and have worked with probably maybe thousands of autistic people in my career, and I still missed it. So I think that it is important to know that you have to be open to all different characteristics, all different signs. And yeah, they do sometimes fit into buckets or sort of certain categories, but they may not, because my son is incredibly social and incredibly affectionate. Now, the way he demonstrates it isn't necessarily consistent with how a neurotypical child might, but he still doesn't present in the way that you might expect a an autistic child to present, and I missed it, and that has been hard for me as well. So again, one of the reasons I share my story. So we saw the developmental pediatrician twice, actually, between the time he was 24 months and about 32 months, so right before he turned 3. And we ended up with an autism diagnosis, same time, right around the time a child turns 3. If they're getting early intervention services, they transition from early intervention to the school district, and the school district also found him eligible under autism. He finally did start walking right around 25 months, and he hasn't stopped since that time. He is incredibly active, climbing, and you would never know that he was delayed in walking. So I share all of this because I think that someone else might see their child in my story. And I hope that this kind of information is helpful. So where we are now is that he's doing really well, but he still needs additional support, and he has a lot of sensory needs. That's kind of where he presents. And I will share more about him and his needs later and how I support him. But this one, really, I just wanted to kind of let everyone know about the path that we took to get there. So did we miss any early signs? Did I miss any early signs? Maybe, but I think the thing that I did right was that we were in therapy. Grant was in therapy as early as possible. Did I feel overwhelmed by the information? Yes and no. There is so much information out there. And in my case, most of it wasn't new to me, but as a parent, the lens is different. So one of the things that I did is I kept telling people, I know that you know what I do for a living, but please talk to me as a parent and not as a clinician, because I needed someone to just speak to me from mom of Grant point of view. Did I ever doubt my ability to navigate this path? No. And that's what I want parents to know too, that you can do whatever you need to do because it's your child. So the trick is knowing where to reach out, knowing where to get information, and knowing where to get correct information. And did I know how to advocate for my child's needs? And that's another thing that I feel lucky to know. It is, I would say the thing that I wasn't fully prepared for is how emotionally draining, and sometimes even physically, it's just tiring going through some of these processes. And I will continue to create videos about what I've done and how I've navigated it, because I think it's helpful. But it is hard. Even knowing how to do it, it is still hard. And another question that I get a lot is, did I know where to turn for help? And I did. And I consider myself incredibly fortunate to know that. And again, that's a big reason that I am here, because I knew where to go and I knew what to do, and it didn't make it easy or didn't make it painless, but it made it doable. And there are so many resources available, and there are so many things out there, but they're not all technically correct and they're not all accurate. My goal is to help kind of level the playing field. That's what I've always wanted to do, is make sure that parents, and honestly anyone else who wants to partake in this information, knows what to do. You know, there were times when I couldn't get things done and someone would say, well, you can file a complaint. And my response was always, I don't want to file a complaint. I just want the services for my child. So I hope that this video, I hope it's been informative. I hope it has been comforting in that you are not alone. There are a lot of us out here, and no matter how much we may know, it feels like the first time because it's your child. And I look forward to continuing to make more of these types of videos. I would love in the comments if there's something that resonated with you, if you would share that, or if there's something you'd like to see, I'd love for you to share that too. Thank you so much, and I will see you again soon.